Welcome to the Behavioral Grooves Podcast. My name is Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. We interview interesting people in order to unlock insights into behavioral science and how we can apply them to work and life.
This episode is sponsored by the Lantern Group, a behavioral design and communication agency focused on helping Global 1000 firms with their employee-based issues, working on everything from helping companies improve their safety initiatives to driving more sales motivation to increasing patient adherence, all by applying BS insights.
What was
That's
that?
Behavioral science insights for those you want to know. It's also brought to you by Behavior Alchemy, applying the lens of behavioral science to better answer the question, why do we do what we do? These two firms are all-star partners in assisting your company with optimizing its teamwork, training, and communication.
In this episode and in the next, we vary from our regular podcast approach. The podcast you're listening to right now is part one of a two-part podcast. Our interview with Rob Burnet, founder of Well Told Story in Nairobi, Kenya, went so well and so long that we decided to break it into two separate podcasts.
In part one, we tee up the work that Rob did with the Ford Foundation and leading into the creation of Shujazz, a Nairobi-based graphic novel or comic book. Shujazz means hero in Sheng, the slang spoken by Kenyan youth. Rob shared the challenge he and his team faced in creating ways to improve the lives of largely disenfranchised population of teenagers in a country where poverty and corruption run high. Shujazz, the hero, was their mythical creation to inspire healthier living.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. And we end part one of our podcast with the true tale of Winnie, a teenager hustling her own path to becoming bulletproof, a term that's used to signify that she's practicing safe sex and has a foot firmly planted on the ladder of success.
Part 2 dives deeper into Well Told Story and expands the narrative into the dynamic of a market where only 10% of the 1.3 million Kenyans who enter the job market each year will go to work for a conventional employer with a conventional salaried position. Everybody needs to hustle in Kenya. Our guest is bent on changing the world one Winnie at a time.
Yeah.
A special musical note on these two episodes. In addition to the theme music that we include on every podcast, composed and performed by our very own Tim Houlihan,
Ta-da!
we are featuring the Shujazz theme music called The Hustler. And it comes to us with very special permission from a well-told story and is a wonderful, wonderful musical interlude.
Cool stuff. So whether you're commuting to work, you're working out, or you're out for a walk, we hope you enjoyed this first part of the two-part Behavioral Grooves interview. If you like what you hear, please check out our new Behavioral Grooves website at www.behavioralgrooves.com. We've launched the site to keep you advised of our latest work and to get your feedback. And give us a good rating from your favorite podcatcher. Even though we're listened to in 54 countries, we still want your support on the podcast. We want to feel your podcast love.
So let us know how we're doing.
And right now, please enjoy part one of our discussion with Rob Burnet.
There's a new boy in town.
Tutaexchange matichings kibao za life. Is he a doctor?
No.
Tutainua na kipesa.
Is he tall enough? No.
Mimi na millions of Kenyan youths.
Is he a majesty?
We kijana,
What's up? Jina lako ni Mimi DJB nakuletea Shujazz radio show.
Youth, love, and hustle.
love and hustle.
Welcome, Rob Burnet, to the Behavioral Grooves virtual studio today.
Welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. We are excited to have you here, and all the way from Kenya, and talking about the world of persuasion, and seeing how that applies in a whole variety of things, including branding and nonprofits as well. So welcome, and thanks for your time today. We're going to start with a little speed round. And so, Kurt, would you like to get started with the speed round for Rob?
I would love to start. So, Rob, if you had to pick between being a lumberjack and being a salmon fisherman, what would you pick?
Salmon fisherman the whole way.
Michelangelo or Monet?
Michelangelo.
Riding a bus from Alaska to Boston or hitchhiking all the way?
Hitchhiking, come on.
So, Rob, actually, you hitchhiked from Alaska to Boston back in some youth of your life. You want to just a couple words about that?
So I'll tell you the trick to hitchhiking back in the day. I'm talking about '92. I think I did it. My friend and I, we had those sleeping mats, those incredibly thin and uncomfortable sleeping mats.
Yes.
And we would write on the mat. We would write the name of the next town. And the theory was then that if some psychopath picked us up hitching, then we could just alight at the next town. Thank you very much. But if it turned out that they were agreeable, then we could say, well, actually, we're not going to the next town. We're not going to Haines Junction or Ketchikan. We're actually going to, Seattle or, Minnesota. And so that was our trick. And we started off in Haines Junction, I think, which is in Alaska. And we finally got out in Boston. Many, and we ran out of mat, that we kept rolling it. I don't know where that mat is. It would be a piece of fabulous personal history now if I still had it, with all those different names of the towns we went to. And we had a couple of psychos pick us up, but on the whole, we met wonderful people who gave us extraordinary hospitality.
And I'm sure there's probably some wonderful stories from that. It's interesting. We're going to talk about persuasion and some other things today, but there's probably something to be said about having somebody pick you up, because they're probably thinking the same thing. Oh, they were psycho. I only have to bring them that mile or two down the road.
There you have it. I hadn't thought of it in those ways, but absolutely, that's what was going on. This was our risk reduction or risk mitigation strategy for both sides.
Brilliant.
The other thing was that my friend hid in the bushes, so that only one of us was visible as the hitchee. And then as soon as the car slowed down, the other guy would leap out and start pushing his bag into the back of the pickup.
Wow. How did you happen to count how many rides you went through?
No, but it was, beyond count. We had a couple for like 3 days. We ended up in a town called Sturgis, North Carolina, at the same time that the world's biggest motorcycle rally.
The Harley Davidson International Conference in Sturgis, South Dakota, actually.
Yeah, South Dakota.
Right. We were there. We were there, and it was the 50th anniversary. And there was something like it was front page of the New York Times, 750,000 motorbikes plus me plus my friend Pip, and we were the only ones who didn't have plaited beards. That was extraordinary. I still have some photographs of that. Mount Rushmore, over an ocean of Harleys. Magnificent. Wow. All you wanted to do was kick the first one and watch them all go down like dominoes and then die.
Yes.
Which would be a death sentence for the person who did that.
Exactly.
So how did persuasion? Were you a fan of persuasion and persuading people to do things before you set off on this adventure?
Nope, I don't think so. Probably I was, but I didn't know it yet. I think I've always quite enjoyed being a salesman. So, and I think I've done that along the way. I didn't have to do that much in Alaska, cutting trees down, but on the whole, that's something I've always enjoyed. But now it's a business. Now it's the thing I do. But I came into it a bit later in life, I would say.
So, Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about Well Told Story and then Shujazz, right? Did I pronounce that correctly? Tell us a little bit about what your purpose is, what you're trying to do, because it sounds fascinating.
Thank you. I'll go back one step beyond that, because so I'm sitting in Nairobi right now. I've lived here for the last 25 years. And the thing I was doing before the thing I do today was I worked for a big American philanthropy called the Ford Foundation.
Yeah.
And they have an office in Nairobi. It serves Eastern Africa. And I was their media, arts and culture guy, funding projects in the region and looking at arts and culture as a vehicle for democracy and for tolerance and for civic debate and so on. And I got involved in the media at that point, and I funded a lot of TV, I funded a lot of radio with Ford Foundation grant money, and we were very pop media. And And the thinking that we applied at the time was, how do we give local people a chance to be in the media? You know, and back in the day when you switch on the television in Kenya, you don't get Kenyans, you get Americans or Latin Americans or Europeans or, you know, Mexican soap. That's the kind of stuff that's on TV here. So it was like, well, shouldn't we ring fence some piece of the television world for us, you know, for local voices? So it came around the same time that digital TV was becoming very inexpensive. You know, you could shoot stuff very simply and cheaply. You could edit on your laptop. So it's becoming more and more accessible. And so we suddenly found we had 3, 4, 5 million people watching TV shows that we were producing because we were making local content and we were doing it relatively well. And we were telling local stories and we were giving local people a chance to be the face of media. So after a while, I kind of got frustrated that while we were doing this, we were still laboring as the Ford Foundation to address other big issues. So we were talking about reproductive health or environment or governance and democracy. And yet the things we were trying to achieve, all of them would only be achieved once we had millions of people changing the way they thought and the way they acted around these key issues. And yet we were not at that stage harnessing the power of media in an effective way to advance those goals. So at a certain point, I quit my job at the Ford Foundation, and after a while, I set up this thing, Well Told Story, that I'm leading today. And it was really about that, to say, well, how do we make a big conversation happen about importance? And at that stage, agnostic about the channels, just saying, can we cause a conversation to come together around really key ideas that if we don't tackle them, if we don't build a fresh consensus, we're not going to make the change that we know to be important happen.
Were there specific topics that you were interested in with regard to these conversations? Were there specific things that you thought, these are some of the ones that interest me the most and that were engaging you?
Great question. So around that same time, something cataclysmic happened in Kenya, which was the election of late 2007, early 2008 went wrong. And for the first time, Kenya rocked on its foundations. And actually, it came quite close to civil war. So Kenya was suddenly split down the middle, mostly by cynical acts by cynical politicians. But as a consequence, half of Kenya pretty much went to war with the other half. And the battleground was filled with youth. It was young, out of school, unemployed young people who were mustered by leaders, political leaders, and set upon one another to achieve the personal political gain of a few cynical leaders. And so in the end, the former head of the UN, Kofi Annan, kind of parachuted in this group of sort of significant African statespeople called the Elders. They brokered a peace. It took about 3 or 4 months. And it was an awful time to be in Kenya. There was a terrible standoff while the whole country was kind of waiting to see whether it would collapse or whether peace would be brought about. And so peace was found. But in the aftermath of that, it became clear that the challenge, one of Kenya's biggest challenges, was young people. This enormous and extremely rapidly growing demographic of under 20s or under 25s who are out of school, who haven't got into further education, who aren't finding employment, and who are having to make their own way, and who are not served by formal information systems. So these are people who are not in school, who aren't in college. So how are they learning? How are they getting ideas? How are they getting information? At a time when the media in Kenya, as in most of sub-Saharan Africa, is entirely private sector. So there is no public service media. All of the radio and the TV is chasing middle-class people who have money that advertisers want to access. So the media does a very poor job in Africa for the poor. It chases people with cash. So, and thirdly, it's not as if there are no opportunities for young people. I've been working with the Ford Foundation. We were doing all kinds of inspiring things. There were fantastic opportunities in livelihoods and agriculture and innovation here and there. But how come none of these things were going to scale. So actually the birth of this project that I now lead was out of all of that. It was this sense that there was an opportunity to make huge conversations happen, and the technology was available. And there was this urgent need, which was a vast and rapidly growing neglected youth population upon whom the future of Kenya and the region stands, who need inspiration, they need opportunity, they need skills, and they need motivation. And actually, can we put all of those things into a media experience that can build the positive energy which is there into new initiatives, into positive change, into agency, and into development? And that's what we've been doing.
Kurt, you're on mute right now.
When you say media, you need to actually have your mic on in order to say that comes across.
It helps.
But you were talking earlier about being almost agnostic over the channel. So you're looking at a wide variety of media. Help us understand what you've done then subsequent. So you started this focusing on youth, obviously all the issues that you had in Kenya back then. What was the process for moving forward then in bringing some of that media attention to that poor population, and what were you trying to accomplish?
So we call the business Well Told Story. So we have a kind of faith, a belief in the power of a good story to get people's attention and to cut through the noise. And I think we've all experienced that. You know, the great teacher that we had was the storyteller. And we all know the difference between a story told well and a story told badly. And the fact that a good story, you don't only connect with it rationally, you connect with it emotionally. And I think, so to begin with, the first point in this journey was to say, well, let's have faith in the power of the story to be transformational. Let's lead with a story, and then we'll deliver the story on whatever platforms we can find, which are going to connect to the people we care about. So the story we wrote is the story of a DJ, of a pirate DJ. And he's a 19-year-old kid who left school last year. He didn't get into college, and he hasn't got a job. But he has a secret. He's built a pirate radio station in his bedroom, and he's able to hack into the frequencies of any radio station he likes with his radio show. And his show is called Shujazz FM. And Shujazz means heroes in Sheng, which is the slang spoken by Kenyan youth. So Heroes FM is a call out to young people. Don't wait. Good stuff is not coming. If you've got something that's working for you, you need to share it. You need to tell me, the DJ, and I'm going to tell everybody else. And by this process, we will share the good ideas that are making young people prosper in our country. So we tell that. So
yeah, no, keep going, keep expanding.
So we've created a DJ character, and then the other main characters in his world are listeners to his show. And there's a beautiful girl from the urban slum, and there's a energetic football playing kid from the village, and there's a 14-year-old girl from the coast, and each of them has a mom and a dad and a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a big brother, big sister, an evil uncle, a corrupt local chief, and each of them basically has an adventure every month, and they call it in to the DJ, and the DJ talks about it. But what we discovered literally on day one, the day the story went live, is that real young Kenyans called their stories in. So our original idea, which would be, we'll create a soap opera and it'll be a way of introducing new notions, was already kind of trumped on day one when we got an email. In fact, it was a text message. The law requires us as publishers to put our address and our phone number in our magazine, in the comic book. That is one of the ways we tell our story. And some kids found that number, and by 7 a.m. on the first day of the first edition of our story, saying, hey, DJ, I've got something. Share this around. This is really working for me. So last year, DJB got 2.5 million text messages. He's running it. I mean, it's now a problem, right? Because we get too many people writing with their ideas. But actually what we realize now with hindsight is that this device of a community of young people sharing ideas without the wagging finger of the adult world, or even worse, the Western world coming and saying, I've got a good idea, try this, young people, but actually a way that we can surface important ideas that really matter in an authentic voice, shared by young people with young people, turns out to be an extremely powerful way of changing what guys are talking about, what young people are thinking about, and ultimately what they're doing. So that's the essence of the story. And then we deliver it on multiple platforms. So the thing we're very well known for here in East Africa is comic books. And I am informed that we are the world's biggest publisher of comic books. So we currently print about 1.3, 1.4 million copies a month of our little magazine, A3 size, 32 pages, colorful magazine. Oh, there's one right here on the table. So here's one that someone has left in the recording studio where I'm sitting. And so we print this. There's the DJ, actually. There he is right there. That's DJB. So we produce this every month and we distribute it free across Kenya. And a separate edition looks the same, but it has different story, different language in Tanzania. In Kenya, okay. And we distribute it. In Kenya these days, we have 3,000 young volunteers who receive a bundle of comics from us every month and give them to their networks. And they themselves are young people who, for example, run a pool table, or they have a video den, or they have a money kiosk, or they've got a cyber cafe. And they're in every town, every small town, every large village in the country. In Tanzania, we have the same process, but all of our distribution in Tanzania is done by Coca-Cola as part of an amazing collaboration we have with them. So by the same means, we get to everywhere in the country. Now, the DJ also has a radio show, right? I mean, he's got a pirate radio show in his bedroom. So we make that show actually in this studio where I'm sitting, the Kenyan show is made, and we syndicate it. So we're on the two biggest Swahili language youth-friendly radio stations in Kenya, and we're on about 18 other stations across the region where you can hear the DJ and you can call in and you can interact with him. And then, of course, social media is big. So our audience and our DJ, and actually all of the characters in the story are online. So we operate a number of Facebook pages. We have about 2 million, 2.5 million young people who interact with our characters online. We have a team of people who deal with that. And then we run events and we make video and we have festivals. We shot a movie a couple of years ago on a Nokia 1020 mobile phone. It's had about 250,000 views on YouTube, but we also gave away 10,000 DVDs to the video dens that we know in Kenya. We're encouraging people to pirate it, encouraging people to view it. So we tell this story across all of these platforms. And we weave a monthly cycle of stories through the comic, through the radio, and through the social media platforms, through the events, through the video. It's a complicated process of creating one story on multiple platforms. We have won 2 Emmy Awards for it, so we're good at it, it turns out. We're the only people in Africa to have won 2 Emmys. And we've picked up a few other awards along the way. So it turns out, who knew, we could do that, because I'm certainly not a media maker by profession, and sometimes that's a good thing, right? Didn't know what we were doing wrong, so we just went ahead and did it. And in the process, we picked up a big audience. So in Kenya, we reach just over 50% of all 15 to 24s. That's the latest number. So that gives us about 5 million, give or take, regular followers of the brand here, and they're connecting with us on one or more platform. And then in Tanzania, where we're only 3 years old, I don't know this year's number, but it's somewhere around 30% of all the youth in Tanzania are connecting with us on one or more of our platforms. And yeah, that's how it hangs together.
That is terrific and inspiring. and so you are telling the story. You are creating the story. So there's got to be some editorial, right? There's some messaging in this, right? Because this is part of the point of it, right? So how do you craft the message that is both reflective and engaging to the audience, and certainly it's a groundswell, it's a ground up model, without having too much editorial that feels like we have the wagging figure of the West coming in or from outside.
Correct. So that is the magic, right? That's the key, because there are many people trying to convey messages, and in fact, we don't even speak about messages here. It's not about one-way traffic. What we do is we surface conversations, and we're very, very clear about this after several years of thinking hard about it and trying to understand what works, and increasingly now using data that we're collecting all along the process to inform our understanding of how change happens and how our media can cause that change or encourage that change to happen. So we can talk about that in a minute. So essentially, we work on big, complex problems that we know our audience cares about. So to our clients, and they're ultimately the people who pay our bills, we say our mission as an organization is to create social and economic value for young people in East Africa. That's our mission. To our audience, we say, we're gonna give you more sex, more money, more fun. That's the promise. That's our brand promise. More sex, more money, more fun. And it turns out that they are the same things, right? Social and economic value over here is more sex, more money, more fun over there. But actually the place where we spend all of our time and energy is over here. More sex, more money, more fun. Because we know that if we can deliver those things, our audience will grow and grow and grow, as it is doing. But at the same time, we have the attention and we have the empathy, the emotional engagement of our audience. Now, the challenge is to retain that while also addressing the big, difficult, knotty, thorny issues of our time. So I can give you a couple of examples.
Please do.
So one of the things we work on constantly is preventing teenagers from having babies they didn't intend. So there's an enormous narrative behind that about, well, firstly, because it's a significant problem in East Africa. Yeah. I mean, there's a very, very high rate of teenage pregnancy, mostly unintended teenage pregnancy. And then, of course, the statistics on the fortunes of young people who get pregnant, particularly young girls, and even their boyfriends, their husbands, it's never a good thing for a teenager to have an unintended pregnancy. They basically, all of their life chances start to move south when particularly young girls have a baby before they are 20, before they're 22, before they've planned it. So it's a subject that we've worked a lot on. Now, so here's a conundrum. Contraception, certainly free condoms, are available probably from 10 places within a 5-minute walk of my office.
Wow.
They are there. Opportunity exists. Access is there. And that's more or less, and Kenya's got it figured out. Distribution is there. Mostly even free if you want them free, right? So that's it's a long time since we needed to put a condom on a banana. People know how to use condoms. So it's not lack of ability that's preventing people from using them. And it's not a lack of access. So what the heck's going on, right? Why have we got enormous out of control teenage pregnancy and clearly young people saying, I didn't want this to happen, but it's happened? There's something else. The problem is not knowledge. It's not access. You can't solve that problem by yelling, get the condoms over here. There's something else. There's something going on in the minds of our audience that we have to attend to if we're going to be able to fix that. So it's interesting that a lot of conversations that we have with a would-be partner begin with an assumption. Young people don't know and therefore they're not making a decision. So young people don't know that they're supposed to participate in county budget hearings. If only they knew, say the World Bank to us. If only they knew, they'd be able to exercise their democratic rights. They'd come in droves. So we're going, well, maybe you're right. Let's dig into that a little bit. So then we send our research team, our knowledge and learning team, out into the field to talk to some of our audience, some of young people. And we go, well, guess what? It's not that they don't know. It's that they are saying, no way in a million years am I going to a county budget hearing. Wild horses will not get me to that county budget hearing. It's not lack of knowledge. No. There's an actual rejection of that behavior. And contraception in this case feels not unlike that. There's an assumption from some agencies, some partners that we've spoken to, which says, if only these girls knew, if only these young men knew. So all we have to do is we have to send them a message. We have to bring them to enlightenment. If they knew what we knew, they would use. And of course, that's a massive simplification. It turns out they are extremely well informed. They know a huge amount about contraception, and they've formed an opinion. And the opinion is, it's not for me. It could be for me later, when I'm a bit older, when I'm a mum, when I'm married, when I reach that stage. Yeah, probably I will go and stand in the queue at the family planning clinic. But right now, age 16, you've got to be kidding me. And then the reasons just stack up. What if my mum saw me? I'm supposed to be a virgin, the girls from school, my reputation, I've got no time, it's too far. I mean, there's a million reasons why girls are saying, it's not for me, it's not for me. Plus, actually, my life's not that good. Maybe a baby would make my life better. Maybe the guy who wants to sleep with me says he loves me. And maybe feeling love and belonging is the thing I want. So we've run a very interesting, and actually it turns out very successful campaign on this. And it was based on a couple of insights. And so the first one came when we were in a pub in a town called Burnett, which is 4 long bumpy hours of driving from Nairobi. So it's a provincial town, and there's got one big hotel in the middle, and we used that to run a couple of focus groups 2 or 3 years ago. And after the focus group had gone away and we were left there sitting, chatting to the manager of the place. And he told us along the way that he had 20 girls waitressing in his hotel, in his restaurant, pub, bar. And he reckoned that all of them were single, and he thought that all of them had a baby at home. And it was like, oh my goodness, that is the thing we're here to try and figure out. Yeah. So we said, okay, if it was your job to get the girls who work here onto contraception, how would you do it? We said, because that's our job. And he answered without hesitation. He said, easy, I'd promote them. We said, what do you mean you'd promote them? He said, well, as soon as she stops being a waitress, and now she's on the other side of the counter and she's serving the beers and she's writing receipts and she's taking money. When she becomes a cashier, you can be certain she's using contraception then. So in there is a fantastic insight that actually it's not about access, it's not about knowledge. It's about the journey that young person feels that they're on. There's a story that she's telling herself. And today her story is, I'm at the bottom of the heap. I'm a waitress. If the customer says, can he take me home? I'm going to say yes. If the customer says he loves me, I'm going to love him back. The day she steps to the other side of the counter, something invisible but profound has changed. Her foot is now on the bottom rung of a ladder that leads somewhere better. And the moment that she feels her foot is on that bottom rung, the story she's telling herself changes. She says, oh, wow, I'm onto something good. I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to protect tomorrow, because I know that a baby tomorrow will interfere with this journey that I'm just starting out on.
This is so fabulous. Kurt and I have been talking about self-identities just literally in the past 48 hours. We've been traveling together, and self-identities are such an important aspect of how we interpret the experiences that come into our lives, right? What's the lens that we're using, right?
And Rob, it's very interesting because I've been taking notes, as you probably haven't seen me turning away here.
I've been fascinated, by the way, Kurt. I've been noticing you taking notes, and I've been loving it. You look so good taking notes.
Because I don't normally do this, but this is fascinating. So I know you're not a behavioral scientist, but when you're talking about all of these things that you're doing, bringing in story to connect on that emotional and not a rational level, that's behavioral science. We know that change happens. You can tell people rationally they should be doing things, but until there is this emotional connection, you are not going to get sustainable change, right? It's that,
because then it becomes intrinsic.
Yes.
And it shifts from extrinsic, the wagging finger, to intrinsic, which is my own decision.
I want to do that. And you're telling a story, as Tim was saying, about getting people to think differently. And so all of a sudden we have self-identities, self-schemas, but this idea of our future self now on a path is a strong motivator for how do you get people, all right, if I'm not on a path, why would I do the behaviors that are, going to take me down it? Because I'm not even on it. Once I can see that there's a journey that I can get to whatever castle on the hill, now I want to take.
Now I'm that person. I've just become that person.
Exactly.
So I think of us as we're shining a light, a little pool of light right in front of people's feet. And we're saying, come on, just step into the light. Step into that light. It's so easy. There's nothing stopping you. So the insight from the bar in Burnett has led us to now we're into our third year of a campaign in our media, which essentially builds on that insight. And it's constructed largely around role models. So it's to be able to say to young people, there's someone just like you who's already taken that step. And look how easy it was. And their foot is on that bottom rung. In fact, they're climbing. And actually, there's little stopping you from becoming that person. Now, I read an interesting book this last year called Hillbilly Elegy by a guy called J.D. Vance. And it's a story about growing up in the American Rust Belt. But he wrote something very interesting, how no one in his community, when he grew up in Ohio, rural Ohio, Middletown, Ohio, that's the name of his city, a town where the mill has closed, right? And no one in his community had ever succeeded. He didn't know anyone growing up who had worked their way out of their circumstances. Essentially, there were only a couple of ways that you could escape. One was you were born on the other side of the tracks. So by some fluke of birth, you were born over there. The other way was God gave you some extraordinary talent for music or dance or performance or sports. But essentially, the only two ways that people could escape were God-given. The thought that you yourself, through your own agency, could change your circumstances. This was not a narrative that people had within their sight. And so when I read that this last year, I realized that that's actually fundamental to our approach, which I hadn't seen until then. This idea that actually by creating a shared story at an enormous scale, which basically says, oh, look, here's a young person who's figured something out, probably a young person who wrote to the DJ to say, I'm doing this thing. So for example, we ran a campaign a couple of years ago about the 6 skills that you need to be an entrepreneur. So, and it was rather simplistic. It was like how to decide on your business, how to write your business plan, and so on. And towards the end of the campaign, it was 6 months, 6 skills, 6 editions of Shujazz, 6 stories in all the media. And at the end, we developed a game, a little bit like Play. And we published it in the center spread of our comic book. And you could play it, and we encouraged you to play it. We had the characters in the story play it. We had them play it on radio, and we asked you to play it. And it was like how much to invest, how much to save, and so on. And very soon afterwards, we got a text message from a young person living on the outskirts of Nairobi saying, DJB, thank you so much. My business has tripled. We go, wow, that's great. So somebody we were lucky to catch it. We get so many text messages. We don't see them all, but someone saw this and rang the person back, and she's a 21-year-old girl. She's migrated from rural Kenya, Western Kenya, to the city. Circumstances tough, leaves home, leaves all those family ties that could support her. She's living in the toughest part of the city, and her hustle, and we talk a lot about hustling, her hustle is that she sells hard-boiled eggs to construction workers. That's how she stays alive. We call that a teaspoon hustle. It's like entry level, right? She sells a tray of eggs per day. Now along comes our story, and she plays the game, and she tries it out, and she goes, wow, if I make like a tomato pickle, tomato, onion, and chili, it's called kachumbari, simple thing. If I make that in the morning and offer it together with the hard-boiled eggs, I triple my sales. I'm selling 3 trays of eggs, 75 eggs a day. My goodness, I've never seen so much money. Thank you, DJB. So we send the DJ, we send an interviewer, because of course the DJ between you and I is not a real guy.
Right.
Shh, correct, actually. Yeah. So we send an interviewer to meet her, and she tells the story, and she shows what she's doing, and we video it, and then we put her on TV later explaining how she's done it, and then we have a radio phone in where you can hear her tell her story, and you can ask questions, and social media thing where you can, live event on Facebook, you can ask her what she did, and then actually we made the game again, and we distributed that second time a bit more elaborate. But at the end of the interview that we had in her home, the interviewer asked her, so Winnie, her name was Winnie. She said, so any kids? Any boyfriends? Any baby on the way? And she said, what? A baby now? That would spoil everything. She said, I'm bulletproof, she said.
That's terrific.
End of story, right? So I'm bulletproof from this beautiful girl she's on the ladder. She's explained how she's done it. Her story is back into the comic book again. It's back into the social media. It's now a photo story where she's explaining. In fact, what we do is we draw the cartoon DJ into the photographs. So it's like he's interacting with her, and she's explaining it. And it's now shifted from our story to her real fact. It's gone from a comic book to being a real story, a real person. And it turns out that for her to end with those words, I'm bulletproof, which basically, by the way, the colloquial meaning for that is that I have an injectable contraception every 3 months, and I insist on a condom. So that's what bulletproof means to our audience. I'm bulletproof. Wow. I'm not risky. And that turns out, of course, to be the most persuasive pro-youth contraception message we have ever developed. And it's all about saying, you can be her, or you can be with her. She is wonderful.
Welcome to our grooving session, where Tim and I groove on what we learned from our Behavioral Grooves interview, have a free-flowing discussion on some of those topics, and whatever else comes into our craniums.
Craniums? That totally threw me. I'm not even ready for a discussion now.
Our craniums, these things up here that sit on top of our neck.
Such a scientific term. Wow. Okay, so Kurt, part 1, this is sort of the first rung on the ladder. Mm-hmm. What did you think?
So it was fascinating. So first off, just like David Hussman, I think Rob is an accidental behavioral scientist, and we'll get into that as we go on to here. But what the work that he's doing brings in a ton of behavioral science insights, but he's not necessarily focused on the behavioral science side of it. It's
But he's
just
using
doing.
it.
He's using it
Yeah.
because it works.
So
right?
so let's talk about some of those.
Oh, I was going to talk about the
you don't
Sturgis motorcycle route.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to talk about hitchhiking across from Alaska to Boston or wherever he went.
And ending up in Sturgis.
Now, if I had a story to tell my grandchildren,
Yeah.
that would be one of those stories that I would just love to have.
It just and to think that it was just accidental, that he just wanders into Sturgis while the motorcycle rally is going on.
Yeah, he didn't even know what state it was in.
By the way, calendar-wise, it happens to be coming up. It's from the date that we're taping. It's actually just a couple weeks away, so
Yeah.
it's on people's mind.
And if you have never been, which I have never been, I've only lived vicariously through others who have been.
Yeah.
It is supposed to be a fantastic and crazy. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, of people convene in their motorcycles and their Harleys onto the small town in Sturgis, South Dakota. So
Sturgis,
yeah.
wow.
So anyway, but he hitchhiked. That was the other thing, and I loved his component of how he talked about, hey, I'm going to just put the next town on our little sleeping mat. That's where we're going to in case we get
right.
Picked up by a crazy guy. And I'm going, yeah. Then the crazy people picking you up also look, oh, yeah, these people, I only have to bring them to the next town if they're really crazy. So
that's kind of a little behavioral science thing. That's a little nudge.
A little nudge of saying, yeah, it's okay. And then the other, his friend, hiding in the bushes. There you go. So what do you think about the work that he's doing, Tim?
Well, it reminds me of the East model that was developed by the Insights team, the UK Insights team, where they talk about East as this model of being easy, attractive, social, and timely.
Right.
And it seems that Well Told Story has sort of orchestrated all of the Shujazz comic books around easy, attractive, social, and timely.
Yeah, I mean they have the various different modalities. So they have the comic book, the radio station, the social media, the TV, the social media.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get. It's widely distributed. The comic books are given away free, so it's easy to come across these. With that, I think it's also easy within the comic book when he was talking about some of the business lessons and the models that they had identified, and they actually just put that as a centerfold inside of the comic book.
Yeah.
So you're reading the comic book, you're not looking to get a business lesson on how to become a better business person, but it's right there, and it's easy to fill out.
And the messages are attractive. And then there's the social side is so huge.
Oh,
it's
yes.
so huge in this and so powerful. I think it's a great lesson for us to take into the corporate world, to think that the social component of any kind of behavior change initiative is so deeply undervalued in at least in most global corporations that you and I get to work with.
Right, and the component where they're using social proof, right? The stories that they're telling are highlighting these people who have succeeded, or
from within the tribe,
from within their tribe.
Like, I know you, I recognize you. Oh, you're succeeding.
You're like me. So there's an element of self-identity that comes into this. The whole component of self-schemas and how you think about yourself, and you can now see for yourself that somebody just like me was able to overcome the situation that I have been stuck in, and I might have felt like I literally was stuck in this situation, but I can see that others have climbed out and have done these wonderful things. And so that social proof, that element of saying, others just like me have done this, I can do it myself.
I also like the fact that Rob tells the story of sitting in a pub and having a conversation with another intellectual, for lack of a better word, and the bartender pipes in and says, I know how to solve that. I can figure that out.
Make them bartenders, right?
Just give them a promotion.
Yeah.
And magic happens.
Yeah.
Magic happens at that point.
And again, when you look at that simple component and you bring the behavioral science element into it, there's an emotional component that gets into an element of hope, right? So as a waitress, there isn't much hope because your ability to climb that social ladder, to have the income, that prestige, all those things that come with being a waitress in Kenya versus being a bartender in Kenya. And that slight difference is really powerful in being able to change somebody's self-identity, their viewpoint of the future, giving them that hope of a better life. And that hope, that progress that they can map out now is really powerful in a motivational perspective.
So this says to me two things. One is the actual differences between a waitress and a bartender are highly environmental, right? That they're highly sensitive on an environmental level. That in Kenya is a really, really big deal. In Milwaukee, maybe it's not such a big deal, right? But
why are you picking on Milwaukee?
Just because we were talking about Summerfest last time. So,
Milwaukee is a beer town, and yes, there might be a big difference there.
There could be, but my point is that within a corporation, if you're looking you have to look carefully at the culture of the organization to find out where are those big jumps, where are the big leaps of going from one job title to the next is a meaningful and something that really conveys something to the community as well as to the person themselves.
Well, and it goes back to the interview we did, and I'm forgetting her name, where we talked about the scope of influence. That was Silky Britain.
Yeah.
There you go. Where Silky was talking about, doing the influence mapping within an organization and understanding who are those connectors, who are those individuals. And I think that's, again, something that Shujazz has kind of done, is they've tapped into some of those connectors within that Kenya tribe or community, and they've gotten them on board, and with that the power of that is really, really impactful.
So just to follow that East model out, easy, attractive.
You have a fun comic book. You have social media.
Totally.
You have an FM radio broadcast. There's elements that, and they're young. It's that 19-year-old, guy, the hero.
Yeah. Timely, and social. Of course, we talked about social, but it's also timely. I mean, they've got stuff going on all the time, right? It's not just a quarterly periodical that comes out.
Right.
This is the kind of thing that they've got stuff being updated, and the team. Rob didn't get into this specifically, but I've seen on his website, on Well Told Stories website, the folks who are working on this are right in the heart of the demographic that they're trying to reach.
Yes.
So they're not trying to be Well Told Story is not trying to be some old dudes shaking their finger at the young dudes. This is absolutely this is all within community, which I think is just terrific.
So it's not us. It's not you or me trying to tell these kids, back in my day,
when I was young,
this is how we did it.
That's right.
Stay off my lawn.
That's exactly it.
So, no, I think there's some really interesting insights that you could even take from that perspective and apply into organizations, right? Mm-hmm. It's looking at who is making the decisions and who is communicating and who within the organization is running the show. And sometimes if there's this disconnect between senior leadership, who is up here in this pedestal, versus the rank and file employees who are down here, and if they feel that there's too much of a difference between those, then you have less likely influence on the decisions or the behaviors that come out from those edicts that come from down from on top of the mountain.
And this is a common misperception held among the senior leaders, that they A, understand, B, know how to communicate, and C, think that the people who are tending to see these differences are really overvaluing it.
Right.
And that really they should just stop doing that. And those are three big misses as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. I think those are huge misses. And I wonder, and this is just a brain fart right now. But you look at many of the highly successful tech companies that have been out in the past 15, 10 years, and you look at them, and those were often led by people who are of a younger generation who have fit into this new ethos. And so
they're creating organizations that have a different look and feel to them.
They are creating a different type of organization. They have a different sense of opportunity and understanding not only their employee base, but potentially the market base that's out there. And so you wonder if in 10 or 15 years, the leadership of that hasn't, moved down in with the way the rest of the world has moved and the demographics. Are they still going to be able to maintain that? Or are they going to become the old guard and the stodgy, back in my day, we did it?
That will be interesting to see. Has any generation escaped that element of, when they get older, of having that sense of endowment, that I know something that you don't know?
Yeah, I'm sure there's individuals. You could probably pick out individuals. But I wonder across the board if that's going to happen.
That someday we'll see a 75-year-old Jeff Bezos shaking his finger saying, if you just would have done it this way.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg eventually getting to a point where he's like, well, if you just would have done it this way.
Yeah, who knows?
We'll see.
All right. Anything else at this point? This part 1 of our 2-part Rob Burnet series.
No, I'm going to hold off talking about music until the end of part 2 to try to get our listeners into part 2 so they can get to the very tail end so that we can talk about music.
All right.
Is that a great teaser?
That is a great teaser. And
not
I
really.
am smiling huge because I didn't have anything prepped for a music conversation, and I need to prep myself for those music conversations. So with that, everybody, thank you for listening, and please tune in to part 2 of our series with Rob Burnet.